Hi, I'm David Johnson, and this is Verse by Verse. My wife and I, and the group we were escorting, had just settled into our seats for the long overnight flight from New York to Israel when a group of Orthodox Jewish men wearing their white shirts and black suits began standing up in the aisles of the plane. The flight crew asked them to return to their seats, but they refused, and in just a few minutes, more than 20 of them had pulled out their prayer books and begun chanting prayers in Hebrew. After about 15 minutes, they finished and returned to their seats, and the flight attendants were able to serve the meal everyone was waiting for. The next morning, during a brief layover in Madrid, the same men put on their phylacteries and held another group prayer in the departure area of the airport. Since, like many of you, I consider prayer to be an important topic, I had to ask myself if that's the kind of prayer that pleases God. I'm not trying to criticize these sincere people. This has been a part of their Orthodox tradition for centuries. But is this kind of recited prayer something that's pleasing to God? Is there some reason God would be responsive to hearing the same prayers recited at a certain time of day over a span of centuries? Of course, these folks are not the only ones who believe they should recite the same prayer over and over. If you have Roman Catholic friends, you're probably familiar with the Rosary, a special string of knots or beads that good Catholics use to keep track of how many times they've prayed the same three prayers, one called the Hail Mary, one called the Glory Be, and the other known as the Our Father. Though most Protestant denominations don't follow that custom, there are many that recite what's known as the Lord's Prayer every Sunday morning. For the person who's serious about living the Christian life, prayer is an important subject. Just like Jesus' disciples, we want to learn how to pray in the right way. Jesus taught his followers that endlessly repeating mindless prayers was not pleasing to God. He further taught them that praying in public in order to be seen by others was a waste of time. Such prayers would not be answered. He criticized the religious leaders of his day, whose prayers were often hypocritical and judgmental of others. In another episode of Verse by Verse, we considered a passage in Psalm 66 that told us that God will not hear the person who is aware of his sin, but is doing nothing about it. We could probably spend quite a bit of time examining the reasons why God would refuse to hear and respond to some prayers. Scripture tells us that it is possible to expend a great deal of time and energy on prayer and yet find that God was not listening. But instead of looking at all of the reasons why prayers might be unheard, let's turn the question around. Is there anything you and I could do, some key we could use, that would unlock the door for our prayers to reach God? There's obviously nothing we can do to force God to hear our prayers, but is there anything we could do that would make him welcome our prayers? The Apostle John gives us just such a key in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 22. And whatever we ask, we receive from him, because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. One of the popular beliefs in religion today is that all we need to do is accept Jesus, whatever that's supposed to mean, and there's nothing else to do. Some teach that doing anything more than just accepting Jesus is trying to earn God's blessings. But keeping God's commandments, striving to change our lives to follow in the steps of Jesus Christ, and living by God's righteous standards is not something we do to earn God's blessings. We live by his standards because we've come to believe that's the right way to live. And as we do that, as we conform to the way of life Scripture reveals, God is pleased with our efforts and welcomes our prayers. So, if I keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight, does God always give me exactly what I think I want? Well, sometimes I don't really know what the best solutions are. If I'm approaching God in the way that Scripture instructs, I'm not telling him what to do. I'm asking him to consider the situation from his perspective and then do what's best. If that's my genuine desire, then yes, I do receive what I ask of him. Would you like to know more about how to pray in a way that pleases God? The Life, Hope, and Truth website is a great resource. Check it out.
Verse by Verse is a companion podcast to the Daily Bible Verse blog, which you can find on the Life, Hope, and Truth Learning Center. Check out the show notes for more.